Well, welcome everybody to the third Mid-America Congregational Board Members Monthly Gathering for this year. Your Mid-America staff are present, as is our tech host, the wonderful Chanel Gomez. And we're excited to kick off this event tonight. We're going to introduce ourselves, the staff that is throughout the evening. But first, I wanted to let you know you're in the right place in case you were wondering. We're going to get settled and grounded for our time together, and then we'll check in with one another briefly before diving into our learning, having some discussions in breakout rooms by congregational size, and closing with time back with the whole. I feel like I need to introduce myself right now. My name is the Reverend Sharon Dittmar. Please call me Sharon. I work with our congregations in the program sized range, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm a middle aged, older aged white woman with wavy hair and teal glasses. All right. Tonight's gathering is an opportunity for us to practice some of the key leadership skills that are essential for these times, these changing, evolving, possible and painful times. We ask that you lean into those skills in your interactions with others this evening, and we suggest the following group norms, which you'll find in the chat. Chanel's going to paste them in there. They include things like take care of yourself, extend grace, share by choice. It's okay to pass and pause. Share the time, speak from your own experience, expect multiple perspectives, right? Isn't that wonderful? Pause for repair as needed and make room for joy, laughter, curiosity, growth, sadness, and silence. And finally, honor confidentiality, particularly with what is shared in the breakout rooms. So perhaps we can share the lessons we've learned, but not this individual stories.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening. Hello, my name is Lauren Wyeth, and I'm on your staff at the Mid-America region of your UUA. And I'm a white person in my late 50s with blondish brown curly hair and tortoiseshell glasses. And I have behind me a chalice, a pink wall, some art on a bulletin board. And my pronouns are she or they.
My name is Chelsea Krafka. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the administrator for the Mid America region and a program specialist who works with our very small congregations, most of which are under 50 members. I am a middle aged, light skinned woman of mixed race with long brown hair and a tie dye shirt today. And my background is a photo that I took of fall leaves that I really love. It's bright and colorful.
I think everyone is back. So welcome back. And thank you all for those of you that are with us the first time for uh, this congregational board leaders gathering. Welcome. We're glad to have you all here, board members gathering. And if you've come back again, it is great to see you. I always love it when people come back the second time. So my name is the Reverend David Pyle. I am the regional lead for the Mid-America region. I use he/him pronouns. I'm a light skin, white identified cisgender man in my early 50s with hair that is becoming grayer every day and blue eyes. And I am in my home office in Oak Grove, Kentucky. It's wonderful to be with you. I use he/him pronouns. And I get the privilege in this series to talk about different aspects of board leadership for about 30 minutes every time. So thank you all for coming in today. We're talking about mission. We're talking about the board's role in relationship to the idea of a lived congregational mission. So a little more about this series as we get started, about the board gathering series. So each month we'll be exploring a different topic of board leadership, and we are recording these. So I believe that you have the ability, as someone who's registered for this course, to be able to go back and see the last couple sessions as well. Last month we talked about the board's fiduciary responsibility, and the month before that we were exploring board relationships, covenant and relationship between board members and between the board with other congregational leaders and staff. And so those are available, and we'll our hope is that through this whole year, we're able to basically do a year-long seminar on what it means to be a leader in a congregational board. Each month we'll have time for a short presentation, about 30 minutes each time, that I have the privilege to be doing. And then there'll be space where we can then break down into discussion groups by congregational size, to be able to discuss through a couple questions facilitated by your primary contact, related to the topic, but also related to your congregation. And most of the material that we're using can be found in the Board Basics course and the Board Foundations course. We're going to put those links to those courses into the chat near the end of the presentation. So you can feel free to click on those if you want to go deeper and explore some more topics, both mission and other topics related to board leadership. And you can also, I highly recommend, taking the course on the UU Institute website known as UU Board Foundations. It is our newest iteration of teaching congregational leaders and supporting congregational leaders in how to do good, effective, boundaried board leadership within our congregations. So to begin talking about board mission, I have to talk about four things. They're what I call the four foundational understandings of a congregation. The four ways that when I, as a consultant, or when others are thinking through understanding who a congregation is, these are the four lenses by which to explore who a congregation is. And the first one is identity. A congregation's identity is who it perceives itself to be and who others in the congregation or beyond might perceive the congregation to be. I usually, when talking about this, say every congregation has a perception of who they are. We are the last bastion of liberalism against the conservative hordes, right? Or we are the church with the ancient building. Or we are the congregation that loves you no matter who you are. Every congregation has a vision of who it is. And the first step in really understanding a congregation is getting a good feel for who the congregation sees itself to be. But to grow past that is also to look at who others see the congregation to be. I once had the privilege to serve our congregation in Ventura, California. And we were known in the community as the homelessness church, as the church that was committed to ending homelessness in Ventura County. And that was part of our own self-identity, but really it was enforced by that's how the community saw us. And another congregation I served, I won't say which one this is because it's not that great a story. Another congregation I served was seen in the community as that place that looks like a daycare, but I don't really know what it is. Because we didn't have good signage up, but they didn't know what Unitarian Universalism was. So between the lens of understanding a congregation's identity as both who it sees itself to be, both in its current iteration and in the past, but also in really understanding who the community sees the congregation to be. So that's the first foundational understanding. The second foundational understanding to look at is what we call culture. Culture is the hardest of the four to define. Culture are those sets of assumptions that every congregation has, that every congregation holds, and imparts how you're in community together. One of the amazing things is that we do have a lot of similarity in culture among Unitarian Universalist congregations, but it's not the same across every congregation. There are some congregations where talking about money is completely a normal thing. Asking someone what their pledge is a regular aspect of congregational life. There are other congregations where talking about money is completely not acceptable in the congregational culture. And so understanding what are the unwritten rules that our congregation believes and accepts. I had one congregation where they had the unwritten rule that they were mean to visitors. And when we went deep into figuring, I mean, literally, they were mean. They even gave them special coffee cups so you knew who a visitor was, so you could be mean to them. And one of the things when we went deep and talked about why this was part of who they were, how they engaged as a congregation, part of it for them was they didn't want to invest in a relationship with someone until they knew for certain they weren't going to leave. And that they couldn't. The thing about culture, about a congregation's culture, is unless you're intentionally looking for it, it is really hard to see. Because you, by staying, have adapted to the culture. It's become your normal. One of the ways I tell people to think about congregational culture is to find someone who's been visiting your congregation for 3 weeks, take them out for coffee after church, and ask them to tell you about your congregation because they haven't adapted to the culture yet. The fourth of the foundational understandings is what I call vision. And this is what kind of community or culture would your congregation create, both within and beyond the congregation, in the wider world? If you had unlimited time, resources, and energy, what would you want the world to be? That is the dreamed of beloved community, the dreamed of goal that your congregation wants to create and build. And the fourth one, mission, what we're going to spend most of our time on to this evening, is discerning what parts of creating that world is your congregation resourced, capable, and equipped to work on right now. So the whole point, I'm going to give you the end, the we call this in the Army, for those that don't know, I'm also an Army Reserve chaplain. We call this in the Army the bottom line up front, or the bluff. I'm going to give you the bluff for the entire workshop tonight, and that is discerning these four things is the foundational work of a governing board. Before policy, before determining whether you are able to use the resources of the congregation appropriately, before signing contracts, this understanding, the board members having a shared and deep understanding of the congregation's identity, of its culture, of its vision and its mission, this is vital for being able to do good board work. Now, hang with me. I'm going to make that case over the next, 20 minutes or so. But just the idea that all the other things that we ask board members to do arise from a developed and shared understanding amongst the board around these four things, and particularly around mission, around what parts of creating the world you want to create are you resourced, capable, and equipped of working on right now. So at this point, I usually in a workshop when I'm doing it, somebody will say, by saying mission, do you mean mission statement? And I want to say as clearly as I can, no. A mission and a mission statement are two related but different things. When I say mission, what I mean is a shared and lived sense among the board members and among congregational leaders of what the congregation is trying to accomplish in the world and how it's going to work on accomplishing that right now. Right? It's not this and part of the dynamic is that my understanding, we may be board members together, and my understanding of the congregation's mission and your understanding of the congregation's mission will not be perfectly identical, and they shouldn't be. Because the understanding of the congregation's mission, of what we are trying to achieve, what we're resource capable and equipped of working on right now, that exists in between the dynamics of our relationship, of what the congregation is called to do and to create in the world. And it's always changing and refining in every circumstance. That shared understanding amongst board members is a developing understanding. Whereas a mission statement, that's a communications vehicle. The purpose of a mission statement is to communicate to those that are not always in the deep discernment about the congregation's mission and what it calls the congregation to, how to communicate just enough of that so that people can discern whether they are called to be part of the congregation. Do you see the difference? One is a ongoing and dynamic conversation about the purpose, identity, culture, vision, and mission of the congregation. and the other is a way of trying to communicate that in an easy, efficient way, right? And mission statements tend to be primarily static. Congregations will create a mission statement that can is intended to be something that you don't have to revisit every board meeting as your understanding is refined. Whereas my recommendation is that a board spend time in every board meeting in some form doing some level of growing together in your understanding of the congregation's mission and vision and purpose. So a board's to me, the argument I'm making is that a board's primary responsibility is this discernment about who does the congregation want to be, what do we want the world to be? And everything else that a board does arises from doing that discernment together well. And we're going to talk about some tools and techniques for how to do that discernment together as a board. But I make the argument. Last month we talked about the board's fiduciary responsibility, which is the board's ability to the board's responsibility to ensure that all the resources of the congregation are being maintained and utilized for the fulfillment of the mission for the long term. So you cannot do good fiduciary responsibility as a board if you do not have a shared understanding amongst the members of the board what the mission of the congregation is. It is the foundational piece of being able to do good fiduciary responsibility. You don't know if you're appropriately utilizing your staff, if you're appropriately utilizing your congregation's reputation in the community, if you're appropriately utilizing your building, if you're appropriately utilizing the funds your congregation has been given by congregation members and by congregation members past, if you're not working from a shared understanding amongst the board of what your congregation is trying to achieve and what the world it is you are trying to create. So I want to use the chat for a moment. I would love to challenge everyone, if you would, don't go find your mission statement on the church website or anything, but in your assessment right now, what reason do you think your congregation or community exists? In one sentence, can you write that sentence in the chat? It's not perfect. No one's going to remember. I don't even think it's going to show up in the recording. But just for a moment, write that sentence in the chat of why you think your congregation exists. What is its purpose? Let's take a moment for that. I won't even read them out. As they're coming in, I'm going to say a few words. I said I won't read them. I won't, but I'm going to say a few words. Safe place, spiritual growth, ethical living, spiritual growth, courageously appreciate diversity, love and care for each other, advocate for social justice, motivate and inspire. So imagine an exercise. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. It's called open questions or powerful questions. But imagine an exercise where in 30 minutes in a board meeting or an hour in a staff retreat, you as a board had a conversation together about this question, where everyone shared in a couple of sentences or in a paragraph what you think the purpose of the congregation is. Why does your congregation exist? And what you're doing is you're not only sharing your own vision of why the congregation exists, you're also listening to what is important about your congregation, what its purpose is, what lights the soul of your fellow board members. And so you are also learning about your fellow board members. You're learning about what draws them to the congregation. You're learning, and in that, developing together a shared sense amongst the board of what is the purpose, what is the mission of our congregation. That is the work that I believe is the foundational work of any board together, not signing contracts or negotiating a policy. Those are all important, but developing this shared understanding amongst the board of what is the mission of the congregation, what is it resourced, capable, and equipped of working on right now in building the vision of the world that the congregation wants to create. And one thing I want to say is that this is a thing that some of our congregations, some congregations in other faith traditions do a lot more naturally than we do as Unitarian Universalists, because they often come with a defined mission that comes to them from their scriptural reference or from their understanding of who their faith tradition is. But this takes a little more work in Unitarian Universalist congregations because of our understanding of congregational polity, because of our understanding of being the congregation being responsible to its membership and in conversation with the community in which we live and in the times in which we find ourselves. So it is our mission changes because the community, the times change around us in a way that we are responsible to responding to. Thank you all for joining me in that quick exercise, which is a little bit of what it means for a board to do something called open questions or powerful questions. When a board is really engaging in open questions process, what they do is they take about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes of every board meeting. And don't worry, come to the later sessions. We'll talk about how you free up 30 to 45 minutes of board meetings. But they take some time and they just have deep conversations based upon questions that can't be answered with a yes or no or a technical answer and lead towards how to live into a deeper understanding of the congregation and its community. I give one example of a congregation. This is a good one, so I'll tell you who it was. It was a congregation in Wilmington, Delaware, that had a powerful question that they engaged as a board. Then the powerful question, this was in the early teens, 2014, 2015, 2016. They engaged in the question of who would we be if we did not have this building? They have an old historic building that's been really important to them. And they asked the question, if all of a sudden we as a congregation did not have this building, who would we be? And that led them talk about their community in different ways. It led the board to explore with one another what was important to them about the congregation. And board members learned about each other from that sharing and learned about what was important and learned about what the calling of the congregation in the community should be. Were they ever going to sell their building? No. They did tell me later that it made adapting around COVID easier, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was finding a question that allows you to explore what are the deepest things that draw your fellow board members into involvement in the community. That's one, this is one tool. Some other tools and your primary contacts can help you to engage some of these if you choose as a board to do some deeper work around mission vision work. Small group ministry programs can be great ways to develop some of these powerful questions. Cottage meetings with congregational listening style. Raise your hand if anybody knows what World Cafe is. I see Lauren doing it. It's a wonderful thing where there's butcher block sheets of paper on tables and people come in with coffee and there's a question in the center and they write their thoughts in crayons or markers on the butcher block to be able to share it. Everybody goes around and reads what everyone else has written. Wonderful fun. There's all different kinds of ways that you can engage this kind of a deep question. The boards that are doing this work well tell me that what it feels like is that the board becomes a covenant group, a small group ministry on the future of Unitarian Universalism and their congregation in their community, rather than a management body for a small nonprofit that they're not getting paid for and just volunteered to do this leadership work. I don't know about you all, but this feels like much more fulfilling and spiritually centered calling of work for our boards than we often ask them to do. So I believe that doing this work, that doing this deep level of conversation amongst board members about what is important, about how the congregation, how the mission and vision of the congregation, how the congregation creates the world it is called to create, that this makes all the other work of the board easier. Almost always, when I'm come in as a governance consultant to do work with a board that is struggling, I ask them to share with me what they know about their congregational mission. And they've rarely have they had any depth of conversation as a board about why they're there, about what the congregation's purpose is. And what I find is that what makes the board work so hard is that every decision means you're having to do just enough of that conversation to get to the decision. Which who gets keys? Please, as a board, don't be having conversation. Find a way to have someone else decide who gets keys. But you know, every decision that comes before the board, there has to be a foundational level of understanding of what is the congregation's mission and purpose. And if you've done that conversation before, then making the decisions that come before the board are much easier. I believe that every minute spent on missional discernment within a board, on learning from each other and hearing from each other what's most important, saves time on all the rest of the board's decision-making processes. Whether it's about the level of the level of financial support for salaries, or whether it is about approving a budget, or whether it is about who gets to design the RE classrooms, the aesthetics committee or the religious education committee. All of those decisions that may come before a board become easier if you've had a depth of conversation with each other about what is important and what the congregation is called to do and to be in the world. This is usually the point where someone asks me, and I added this slide this time for the first time, shouldn't the congregation be discerning the mission? And my answer to that is yes, and it's the board's job to help them do that. The congregation as a whole, both as the congregational meeting, as the annual meeting, or in other informal settings like listening sessions and stuff, it is the least efficient form of congregational decision making. Right? It takes the most people, it takes the most effort, and it's usually somewhat messy in some ways because the more human beings you have involved in the process, the less efficient it tends to be. And one of the reasons why congregations have governing boards is to be able to get to that sweet spot between having enough diversity in the decision-making process and enough connection to the broader congregation to be representative, while at the same time being small enough to be efficient and nimble in making decisions faster. So yes, it is the board's responsibility to engage the congregation and to draw from them the information that helps board members to have the ongoing discernment about the congregation's mission. But that ongoing discernment related to decision making can't be done by the body of the whole. The congregation charges its board to be continually discerning in decision making. What does our mission call us to in this decision? So I'm going to take a few more minutes and talk about what open questions and powerful questions look like. Developing a good open question, because this is the one. Can you comment on the role the minister might play in this process? Yes. In some cases, a minister is. I'm going to answer Ted's question, and I'm going to come back. In some cases, the minister is a board member, ex officio board member. Ex officio does not mean not really a board member. It means board member by right of office. And in some cases, they may be voting board members, and they may not be voting board members, but participating in the conversation is a good, and some congregations will want the minister to take some leadership roles in helping that mission vision discernment. But I would make the case that some congregations try to offload responsibility for the mission and mission discernment to the minister. And in our tradition, it's not us religious professionals, it's not us ministers who are the primary holders of the mission of the congregation. It is the members. represented by the board. And so a role, yes, but I sat with one congregation once whose minister was on sabbatical, and I asked them the question, what does your mission say about this decision that is before you? And they said to me, and it broke my heart, our minister always tells us that, right? So just to hold that space. Thank you, Ted, for the question. And I have like 5 minutes left, so I'm going to push. The powerful questions are ones that cannot be answered with information or facts. Challenges the board members to assess their own values and strengths, and it feels like covenant group questions. So some good, powerful questions might be: if we received $2 million, what could we do that would change the world? It's a good, powerful question, right? If I could think of more, but at the moment I'm not getting there. And that's because of the timing. But you get the basic premise, and your primary contest can help you to develop a good, powerful question. Once you get the rhythm of this, it becomes easier and easier. And I find that powerful questions often come up in other board discussions. So when you're talking about, as a board, you're having a conversation about the flooring, please let somebody else have that conversation. But you're having a more mundane conversation. Someone says, well, maybe we want to think about what we might use this building for in the future. That sounds like a great, powerful question. What's something amazing we could use this building for someday that we're not doing now? Right? So having a list and having someone on the board charged to capture those powerful questions that come up in regular conversation of the board's other discernment is a great and wonderful way to engage that and to develop those. Which is why next month our topic of conversation will be the board's responsibility to draw information from the congregation and other stakeholders. So board communication is going to be our topic of conversation, what in governance language is called linkage, right? How you remain connected to, passing information to, and receiving information from the stakeholders of your congregation. And the stakeholders of your congregation are anyone who has a vested interest and success in the mission of the congregation. Those are congregants, but it could also be other congregations near you. It could be your UUA regional staff. The board, next month, we'll be talking about the board's responsibility to be in a multi-direction information relationship with all of those who have an interest in your congregation's mission. There are some, I mentioned them before, some additional board trainings that we like to recommend. Thank you, Chanel, for dropping them in the chat. I really do recommend spending some time and going deep into some of these as you're developing as board members. And some of these are actually also developed to give you the ability to create a board training program within your own congregation. So next month, linkage with stakeholders. Thank you all for coming. I think we are now going to move towards breakout groups.
Ooh, let's take a big breath, though. That was a lot of information to put in our brains. Woo! Thank you, David. I've heard this more than once, this presentation. I still learn new things every time, so thank you for that. My name is Kiana Dene. It's always both parts, like Marianne or Linda Susan. I am an African American woman with colorful glasses. I have locks that are coming out of my headband, and a green tracksuit jacket because I'm living my best tracksuit auntie life. We are going to head back into breakout groups in a minute where we'll continue together. And I want to give us 2 questions to kind of frame the space and the time that we have. These will be posted in the breakout group, so you don't have to try to remember them. Round 1, we'll go through and we'll ask, what stood out for you from the presentation on the board's relationship with the congregation's mission? In the second round, we will ask, what is your congregation's mission? Not the mission statement, but your understanding of the congregation's mission. As we head back from our breakout groups, I invite your primary contacts to share one takeaway that you have from your group discussion. If you feel so moved, we invite you now to share in the chat one learning that you took away from the time that your small group time together. I'm going to start with my friend Sharon. Who had the biggies, the big kids today? Sharon or Lauren?
I did, and there was one person, which was, I don't know, a big surprise. And the thing I'm going to remember was Mary's question of who would we be if the building wasn't here? Because I think that's a deep question.
David, were you with the group tonight, David?
I was with Sharon. I'll say that the piece that our group talked about a little bit was how to use powerful questions, how that could change the way a board's dynamic feels, and not just how it deepens the relationships, but how it changes the dynamic, the culture of the board.
Thank you. Lauren.
We talked about a lot of different things. Feel free to help me out, folks who are in this conversation with me, by adding things into the chat. One of the things that I noticed is that folks were curious about whether okay, so David, your thing about mission and mission statement, not the same thing. That captured our imagination. And then there was curiosity about whether, oh, would my definition of the mission of our congregation be shared by other board members? Or would we have very different ideas about what the mission is? And let's see, what else? We also were really quite captivated by this idea of what our identity is, and how we would name that, and how flexible it is or isn't, and how we might lead in ways that help people be more flexible around what they're comfortable with. When new people come in particular, who might have an influence on what the culture of the congregation is.
Thank you. I'm going to toss it to Chelsea to share for the smalls.
Oh, there were a few folks in our group that spoke to David's thought about taking somebody out for coffee and asking them about their impressions of the church. That was mentioned a couple of times, and I think it really speaks to the underlying theme of the importance of relationships in relation to mission, especially in our small congregations.
So much good richness. I want to thank you all for sharing your the things that happened in those spaces tonight. I'm going to toss it to my friend Lauren.
All right. Thanks for that. All right, so we're moving into our closing. We want to make sure to thank you all for attending this evening. And we want to offer our thanks to David for centering us in the board's shared understanding of a congregation's mission. These are really great topics that you are leading us through in this series, David, and so valuable for us to have the opportunity to step back and think about these issues rather than just be mired in the work of it all. So we'll notify you by email when the recording of this session is posted online. I know some of you have been sharing them out with other folks on your board. And so you can do that with the one we've recorded this evening. If you've missed the last couple, you can also find them on our website, so you could review them if you're interested. We hope that we'll see you all back next month. We're going to meet on December 10th, and we'll explore how boards can assess how well a congregation is fulfilling their mission. And in addition to this monthly gathering, we invite you to check out other opportunities and programs on our website.
Lauren, if I could take just a moment of privilege to say
Yes.
thank you all for your feedback and what you're putting into this forum, simply because we've shared it with a few other senior UUA staff, and I keep hearing back from them how useful it is for us to be able to share through the entire UUA system some of what you're experiencing in your congregations. And so I just want to say thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we're all in this. It's fractal, isn't it? We're talking about how much you are curious to hear back from folks in your congregation and hopeful that they will share their insights and observations about the congregation with you as board leaders. And we are also grateful for you as board leaders sharing your insights and observations with us, and so on and so on. All right, friends. We'll close a couple minutes early this evening then, and as we close, we extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of leadership that we bring to our shared living faith. We will carry and share that light until we are together again. Go in peace, dear ones. Good night.
Thank you, friends.